Welcome to Caring for Kids, where we discuss physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of children in a positive, loving environment that promotes good decision-making. We believe in parental responsibilities and setting an example that will guide your children along life's journey. We want to raise the issues that matter to parents and children alike. Now here's your host, Carl Krebs.
Welcome back to Things That Matter and our third segment, Caring for Kids. In this segment, we want to talk about things that matter, things that are important to you as parents, as grandparents, as we watch our generation grow up before our eyes. As you just heard, perhaps you joined us in our other segment, the world does seem to be a whole lot darker than it used to be. And we need to be a light of hope as we shine wherever we are in this world. Tonight on this segment, and I'll tell you up front, I had a hard time getting anybody to come on to talk about this. I appreciate that because it's a contentious and controversial issue. The question I posed tonight is, are we ready for cameras in the classroom? And I talked with a friend of mine who is a very skilled, very knowledgeable, very experienced educator, 25 years experience teaching kids. And when I posed the question, she didn't even hesitate. She said, absolutely not. The moment cameras come into my classroom, I'm out of here. I said, whoa, I'm not suggesting even that we should. I'm asking the question. And we went on to talk about this from the perspective of a teacher. One of the examples that she gave me was she said, funny you're asking that question today. Today, I had to get to the top of my voice to get the attention of the students. She teaches, I think it's grade 6 and 7. Now, those are challenging years. I remember what I was like in grade 7. Oh, I could never be a teacher. But I said to her, so what caused that? She said, I just couldn't, in my normal voice, get them to settle down. I had to get as loud as I could to get their attention so that they would settle down, that we can resume class. I said, I understand that. I can remember what it would take, what it did take, and what it does take today. Because let's face it, we weren't that great as kids. Many of us acted out in classrooms. So I said to her, so that video, if that were captured, would probably cause some backlash. There'd probably be some questions you're going to have to answer. She said, oh, yeah. But I said, let's look at it from a maybe slightly different perspective. The context is there as well. The context of what is going on in that classroom at the time that preceded the volume that you had to use. Now, nobody wants themselves videoed or caught on video in a less than ideal environment or less than ideal performance. She's a wonderful teacher, by the way. And I said, but you can understand that in the context of what was going on, you had to do what you had to do. So you get the context of what happened before to prompt you to lose, to have to use volume, let's say. Not lose your temper. She doesn't lose her temper. She used volume that she didn't think she ever had to use, but it did happen. And I said, now, in isolation, somebody goes home and said, wow, the teacher just screamed at us today. Oh, the parent said, the kid is going to tell you the most favorable version of the story that makes them look innocent. That's just kids. So I said, it would be possible then, in that moment, to capture everything that happened. What happened before, what happened afterward. I said, but I'm more concerned from the perspective of what's being taught in the classroom today that is slightly off the radar. The things that aren't being necessarily announced to parents as events that are taking place in the classroom. Now, there are protocols for this, and there is a policy handbook that school divisions put out. But that isn't necessarily being followed, because there was an incident that happened in Eastern Canada. I'm not going to get into the specifics of it, but I have it. And I'll post it on our website, where parents found out, to their own horror, that a presentation was made in that classroom that they clearly would have never approved of, that they had no knowledge of it, that it was going to take place, and were forced to express their disapproval afterward. So I thought to myself, this was what started it, as well as the incident in Spring, Texas, where teachers were administering a sleep patch to kids. This happened back in November. It really happened that these teachers thought this might be a good idea, that we're going to dope up the kids. And they were putting on these patches that had melatonin in it, which is not recommended for children. And once that story leaked out, and it was only because one of the children spoke to their parents to tell them about that. So all of this in the context of accountability. I am not advocating even for the cameras, but are we at the point where we need to know what's going on? Picture a limited access camera system in the classrooms that parents, and only parents, would have access to watch what's going on in the classroom, to see the kind of activity that's going on, to encourage the parent to get the context of what happens in that classroom. That's not necessarily a bad idea. But I do understand the teacher that I spoke with who said, I'm really opposed to it. Like in the part of the conversation that started, she said, absolutely not. But as we got to the later part of the conversation, she said, that might be something. We know that schools today have surveillance cameras on them because certain people with less than ideal intentions are walking into our schools and doing horrific things to children. You know the shootings. You know the incidents that have gone on. So surveillance cameras should be and are a part of schools to monitor the safety of the students and the teachers in it. But as we enter into these agendas that we don't seem to know enough about, I'm asking the question, are we at that point? A lot of you have responded to the agenda of the school divisions that have said, we're going forward with this SOGI 123. We're going forward with the inclusivity, the DEI, and all that stuff that has entered into our school systems already. With such a system in place that would allow parents access, we would know in a moment what's going on in that classroom. And that would enable us to not attack the teacher, but to question what happened here. What were you saying? What was the intention of this lesson as you ask my children or asked my child to state their pronouns? What part of education does that factor into? So that's a question I think we cannot be afraid to ask. We cannot be afraid to enter into that conversation because conversation brings clarity. Conversation brings things to the surface that we sometimes think about but don't give voice to. And I want to give you an analogy here because I deal with surveillance all the time. I'm a truck driver, as most of you know. There is a camera in my truck that records everything. This camera faces outward, so it does not record me because the company I work for has a privacy policy that extends to my own privacy in my own domicile, which is what the truck often is. It's my personal space, it's my workspace, it's my residence on the road. Now, I wouldn't want somebody capturing me on video 24/7 in the cab of my truck. But that camera captures everything that goes on around me. The system is so sophisticated that if I were to say the incident was this, and I applied the brakes with tremendous force, but didn't bring the vehicle to a stop and the accident happened, they can monitor that through the camera to know exactly how much brake pressure I put on the brakes. So am I a liar or am I being exonerated by the camera system? And I have to tell you at the outset, I was really against this. I thought, well, this is the first time I'm going to have a camera in my truck. But a colleague of mine says you can look at it as the system that busts you or the system that you can make your friend. Here's another aspect to it. This is truth because we're in the trucking industry, and the trucking industry is more closely monitored than any other industry out there. It is listed still in the top 10 dangerous jobs in the world. And the accidents that happen in commercial driving, the number one reason is driver fatigue, and number two is distracted driving. And you heard me recently talk about the incident in Altona, which cost the life of a beautiful young mother, a wife, and her lovely daughter. If there were a camera in that truck, which we don't know yet, we're going to know exactly what happened. If there were a camera in that truck, as there is in my truck, my company calls me up and wants to know what happened. They want to know my version. Every incident is recorded, and it keeps me in check. Let's face it. Everybody out there at some point can be easily aggravated to the point where they're going to do something that is quite frankly stupid. And I see this all the time. I see drivers pulling up on the backside of a vehicle, a passenger vehicle, and riding that tailgate in a place that you would think that's insane. If there's any incident of any kind, that truck is going to be in the back seat of that car before anyone can imagine. In a blink of an eye, that will happen. But the camera is a checkpoint. It's a point where you say, I ain't doing that. Might be tempting, but I ain't doing that. It holds me in check as a truck driver to be sure that my actions are defensible, that my driving has some integrity to it, that I'm not risking my life or the life of that other vehicle that may be in my place or in my way in a way that it shouldn't be. So I look at the cameras in the classrooms and I say, what would that do for the teacher? It does pose a unique challenge, but as we have adjusted to it in the trucking industry, I learn to check myself every day. We want to be checked. We want to be accountable first and foremost to ourselves for our actions and the things that we say and do. And the camera does that in a wonderful way, but I can also see the concern that it brings. So as we face these challenges, and by the way, when I talked with my teacher friend, she says, you got to get involved with the teachers. You got to get involved and find out, because a lot of teachers are willing to sit down and have those conversations so that you can understand what is it that they're trying to do. We all want our kids to have a good education. We want them to have the basics of life so that when they graduate, they make a meaningful contribution to society. Our children are precious to us, and we want to know that what's happening in that classroom checks and squares with our values as a parent, as a guardian, as a grandparent. I think it's important because when that child goes to school, we don't want to see or have them exposed to things that we don't agree with, the things that you would have to undo at home. When I talked about the incident in Eastern Canada, the parents were in the cleanup operation of that, and it was horrific. This person who presented did this in such a ghastly, inappropriate way that these children went home and they were just a little bit more than disturbed about it. They told their parents about it. The parents reacted the following day by keeping over 100 students home from that school. That was retaliatory. That was to send a message. But if we had the kind of proper closed circuit type of monitoring in a classroom, what would that do? What would that do for the student who acts out and makes himself to be innocent? When mom sees it, you're busted. What about the teacher that is saying and doing things that they wouldn't necessarily want? I think we have to look at it and say, we got to balance that conversation out. Again, I'm not advocating for the cameras. I'm advocating for the conversation that is necessary before we get to the point where it's too late. We all want to anticipate what's coming and properly organize ourselves, get our thoughts together, collective reasoning, discussion brings clarity. There is conversation, clarity in conversation. Let's have the conversations and not ignore it. I know one thing. It's not possible any longer to simply send your students, your loved ones, your children to school and expect that the education that you received is the same one that they're receiving today. I don't think we're well past that point. And in the course of this, I talked with a school teacher, retired, of over 50 years. And he shared from the perspective of a teacher, having begun when corporal punishment was in force, to the point now where teachers cannot say and do a lot of things that would probably be beneficial to bringing that child in alignment. So much is so sensitive and verboten from being done that we've now pulled back so far from that line of good, solid, constructive discipline to the point where anything goes. It's too big a price to pay to send our kids out there and hope for the best and not know what's going on. So in the meantime, my challenge, caring for kids, be the involved parent. Be the parent that asks the tough questions. Be the parent that goes into that classroom and said, I heard something. I'm not here to accuse. I'm here to inquire. Did this happen? Because my son, my daughter, was very uncomfortable with this. I need to know what really happened. And I want to know, hat in hand, so to speak. Go to the teacher. Make your inquiries known in a polite way. I dare say you're going to be met with opposition. The opposition that often happens is when we lose our temper and we go in there with our guns loaded and we let them have it. But this is important as we work through this agenda. And let me say this much. On a closing note to this section, it was recently announced by the world's largest employer that Walmart is pulling back from DEI. DEI is in all the schools right now. I applaud a corporation as large as Walmart and others that are following suit, by the way. They're not the only one that are pulling back from diversity, equity, and inclusion because those words have been hijacked and we're paying a price. We don't want to pay that price. We want to see that. So, in the leadership that's out there now and the significance of a big change in the White House that's going to take place in January, if you haven't been hearing what Donald Trump's going to do about it, then you just haven't been paying attention because he is out there to straighten up things that need to be straightened up, things that have gone too far. Caring for kids. What's more precious than doing that? I want to thank you for joining us here on Things That Matter. I want to ask you to consider supporting this show, even without money. How does that work, Carl? Let me tell you. Likes and shares. The way we're going to grow this podcast, the way we're going to get people to come is if you, the listener, like and share our program, wherever you are. Some of you have great influence. I'm going to be reaching out to you personally in the next little while. I do what I do because I truly do care about these things that matter. So I'm asking you, as you watch this show, to like it and share it wherever you are so that people will go to see what you thought was important may be important to them as well. That's how this works. It's really straightforward. There are hundreds of thousands of podcasters out there. The numbers are alarming. But when I decided to do a Things That Matter podcast, I decided to employ really good technology, really good production studio. So we do this at a higher caliber than what may be justified by the viewership. But everything starts with one, and that's where I started. So I'm asking you to support us by liking and sharing it. And if you are in the position to financially support us, we've got a program for you there too. And I'd love you to reach out to me, info@Things That Matter. Next week, we're going to be back here. Lord willing, and if the creek don't rise, we're back here next week, Thursday at 6:30 for more of Things That Matter. Good night and God bless.
Imagine having no pain, sleeping through the night, having more energy, and reversing the aging process. Now imagine LifeWave doing that all naturally, without the use of harmful drugs. X39 is the most advanced patented light therapy in the world. LifeWave is a simple wearable patch that you place on your body that stimulates the body to regenerate and heal itself. With more than 20 years of research and over 100 patents, LifeWave specializes in age-reversing all-natural health. Find out what the power of the patch can do for you. For more information or to join our LifeWave community, go to thingsthatmatter.ca/LifeWave. LifeWave, reversing the aging process naturally without the use of harmful drugs.